So here we are again, watching the British press and the palace play the same tired game. You know the one where they twist the truth, demonize Prince Harry and clutch their pearls every time he dares to speak. Every time he shares his truth, their fragile little illusion of control begins to shatter. And let me tell you, the noise we're hearing right now from palace insiders and so-called sources isn't outrage, it's fear. Fear that the man they tried to destroy refuses to go quietly. Fear that the son they cast out isn't just surviving, he's thriving and speaking out. Prince Harry did something incredibly powerful, something very few royals have ever dared to do. He looked the British establishment in the eye and said, "No more lies." After the High Court rejected his appeal for security that was unjustly stripped from him and his family in the first place, Harry didn't hide. He didn't sulk. He didn't retreat to some shadowy corner of Montecito. He stepped right in front of a BBC camera with grace and courage, and he told the world exactly what had happened. And what did he say that sent the palace into full-blown meltdown mode? That the royal family under King Charles's leadership not only took away his security, but pressured foreign governments not to offer protection either. That his own father had the power to keep his son and grandchildren safe and chose not to. That the supposed institution of duty and family threw its own bloodline to the wolves in favour of appeasing tabloids and preserving outdated hierarchy. Let's pause on that for a moment. We're talking about a father. A father who publicly claims to love his son, deliberately withholding protection not just from his adult child, but from his grandchildren. Prince Archie, Princess Lilibet, babies, toddlers. And when Harry dares to point that out, when he dares to say out loud what everyone behind the scenes already knows, the palace comes running with their fake outrage and their sanctimonious headlines. Because the plan was already in motion. The palace and their press puppets had their script written. Poor Charles, long-suffering father. Harry loses again in court, and the prodigal son still hasn't learned. But Harry threw them off script. He changed the narrative. And oh, how they hate that. Let's not pretend this is about some offhand remark about Charles's health. When Harry said, "I don't know how much longer my father has," he wasn't making some dramatic, disrespectful comment for effect. He was showing humanity. He was exposing the emotional reality that any child would feel, a need for reconciliation, a desire for connection before it's too late. He was saying, "I've tried. I want to fix this. I want to be there while I still can." And what do the royals do? What does the media do? They twist that vulnerability into an attack. They call it poor taste. They label it a betrayal. They weaponize it to once again paint Harry as the villain in a story where he's the only one telling the truth. Let's get something straight. The only reason Harry even needs to speak publicly is because the palace refuses to have real, honest, private conversations. They've iced him out. They've silenced him. They've thrown him under the bus repeatedly. And when he speaks, they gasp, as if he is the problem. And what about the substance of what he said? The fact that his family's security was stripped out of spite, and that Charles did nothing to stop it. That foreign governments were warned not to offer them protection, as if Harry and Meghan were some kind of international threat, instead of two people trying to live safely outside the toxic confines of the British royal machine. Where is the outrage over that? Oh, that's right, there is none. Because the palace doesn't care about truth. They care about optics, they care about power, they care about silence and submission, and Harry refuses to be silent. Meghan refuses to be diminished, and that terrifies them. This whole charade about rebuilding trust is laughable. Trust? There was never trust to begin with. Not when the palace fed Harry and Meghan to the tabloids, not when Meghan's private letters were leaked. Not when the institution stood by and allowed, encouraged even, the lies, the racism, the misogyny. Let's be real. Harry was always the scapegoat, the convenient distraction, and now that he's gone, they still need him as a target. Because as long as they can point fingers at Harry, they don't have to look at themselves. They don't have to answer the real questions. Why was Meghan never protected? Why was she suicidal and left unsupported? Why are William and Charles so determined to keep Harry out in the cold? What exactly are they so afraid he'll say next? And let's not forget the media's role in this, the Telegraph, the Daily Mail, the Times. They're not reporting facts. They're running palace-approved propaganda. They're desperate to frame Harry's every word as a betrayal because they can't stand the fact that he's no longer their puppet. He doesn't owe them interviews. He doesn't need their validation. He has his own platform, his own voice, and an audience that actually listens. And what of Prince William? The heir to the throne who's suddenly being painted as a leader in waiting, who's suddenly got all these puff pieces talking about when I'm king. That's not coincidence, that's power positioning, that's a quiet preparation for the inevitable. And if Harry sees that writing on the wall, if he knows Charles's health is in question and he's watching William move in like the crown's already his, then, yeah, maybe that remark about not knowing how long his father has wasn't just a plea for reconciliation. Maybe it was a warning. But let's be clear, this isn't a story about betrayal, it's a story about bravery. Harry has stood up to the most powerful institution in Britain. He's spoken out against the lies, he's protected his wife and children, he's challenged corruption, and every time they try to shut him down, he comes back stronger. And Meghan, let's not forget her strength. She has endured the most vile abuse imaginable. She's been attacked by the press, betrayed by her own family, and hung out to dry by the institution that was supposed to protect her, and yet she stands tall, dignified, kind and powerful. Together they are a force, and the monarchy hates them for it. So to the haters, to the palace insiders, to the so-called sources whispering nonsense into tabloids, save your breath. We see you, we know what you're doing, and we are not fooled. And to Harry and Meghan, thank you. Thank you for your truth, for your courage, for your love, and for refusing to be bullied into silence. You have inspired millions. You have turned pain into purpose, and no matter what they say, we are with you. Sources. Prince Harry's comments about his dad's health were in particularly poor taste. It cannot be overstated how much the British monarchy and British media absolutely hate Prince Harry's willingness, time and time again, to speak for himself and tell his own story. They hate that Harry puts his business out there on the record and creates a historical record which can be used as a reference for years to come. They hate that he disrupts palace talking points and tabloid narratives. Well, King Charles and his courtiers are incandescent that Harry hopped in front of a BBC camera 2 seconds after he lost his High Court appeal. I can only imagine that a huge chunk of this rage is because the palace already had their "Harry is terrible for this and that" talking points for when he lost the case, and his BBC interview disrupted the already set narrative. So now they've had to create a new narrative out of thin air, one which conveniently sidesteps the larger points made by Harry's BBC interview, namely that the palace instructed Ravek to yank the Sussex's security in 2020, that the palace tried to force other governments to not keep the Sussexes safe, and that Charles could easily ensure the Sussexes' security for visits. But Charles doesn't give a sh-t about his son or grandchildren. Their emergency narrative is that Harry is gaslighting his father, whose thunder was stolen by terrible Harry. The palace is obviously trying to fine-tune these talking points, which is where this Telegraph piece comes in. 2 weeks ago, a Telegraph reader wrote in to ask, what will it take for this rift between the King and Prince Harry to end? Back then, the answer seemed straightforward. When the security court case was over, whether the Duke of Sussex won or lost, there was a world in which they could conceivably talk again. When the dust settled, whether the Duke was vindicated or at least felt he had tried his best, it was fractionally possible that father and son could reconnect, without leaks, without showdowns, without fears of jeopardizing a Court of Appeal case in which the King must be scrupulously uninvolved. The King loves his son, sources have always emphasized. Harry, whatever some of his decisions suggest, loves his father in his complicated way. After years of bombshells in the form of interviews, a memoir, Netflix documentary, podcasts, onstage quandars, and more interviews, it was just possible that things would fall quiet enough for them to talk father to son again. The only thing required was rebuilding a fragile trust. Prince Harry's appeal was rejected. His interview, hours later with the BBC, felt like the last throw of the dice. He will now go to Sir Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, to ask for the board which decides his security status to be reviewed, he said, and still loves his country, despite what some people in that country have done. He wishes someone had told me there was no way to win this case through the courts beforehand. Each answer was a revelation. Many served as evidence as to why the King and Prince Harry stopped talking in the first place. Insiders have described lack of trust, the belief that any detail Prince Harry gleans about his family's words, thoughts, or indeed health may eventually make its way into the public domain. There was one line in the interview, therefore, that may have done more than any other in the last 5 years to ensure that they cannot go back to how things once were. "I don't know how much longer my father has," said Prince Harry, reflecting on his father's cancer. "He won't speak to me because of this security stuff, but it would be nice to reconcile." It is impossible to overstate how little the king or the palace would have appreciated the airing of such sentiments. All are acutely aware of the king's health, of his ongoing cancer treatment, and his efforts to keep the royal show on the road throughout. The palace operation will give no clues about his prognosis or what he suffers in private. Maintaining that his progress is good and a recent hospitalization for the side effects of treatment was merely a blip. Prince Harry's choice to raise the question of how long the king has left to live was described by one source, moderately, as being in particularly poor taste. "There is," they said, "nothing that can be trusted to remain private," adding that as for there being no contact, well, he has just proven why yet again. The emotive language describing Prince Archie and Prince Lilibet as my father's grandchildren will have been noted, alongside the accusation that duty of care has been thrown out the window. It's hilarious to think that this is all the palace could come up with. If only Harry hadn't spoken to the BBC, he might have been able to reconcile with his father. What absolute horsish tea. Trust me when I say that the palace-issued talking points would have been much different had Harry not spoken to the BBC. And when Harry said, "I don't know how much longer my father has," I absolutely knew that Harry was making a pointed comment. And here's the proof that it landed exactly as he intended. Harry cannot believe that his rotten old father is in such declining health and still refuses to even keep him updated on his health. And it's so telling. That's the one thing the palace is harping on too, right? Not the stuff about the palace pressuring other countries to put the Sussexes in harm's way. No, they're super mad that Harry suggested that Charles is at death's door and lying to the country. I sense that Harry has been paying attention to all of William's "when I'm king, I'm going to do this and that" stories. Harry sees that William is acting like Charles is at death's door too. If you're listening right now and you believe in truth, if you believe in justice, in love, in family, and in standing up for what's right, this is your squad, the Royal Sussex squad. We're here for the long haul. We're not backing down, and we're not going anywhere. Make sure you subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Hit that like button, and if you're moved by the truth we're sharing, if you want to help us keep pushing back against the lies, click that super thanks and show your support. Every voice matters, every truth matters, and together we are making a difference. Until next time, keep your head high, your heart open, and your crown firmly in place. This is Royal Sussex Squad signing off.